a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Jean Grey. Jean Grey Summers is a fictional superhero appearing in American comic books published by Marvel Comics. The character has been known under the aliases Marvel Girl, Phoenix, and Dark Phoenix. Created by writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby, the character first appeared in the X-Men. Jean Grey is a member of a subspecies of humans known as mutants, who are born with superhuman abilities. She was born with telepathic and telekinetic powers. Her powers first manifested when she saw her childhood friend being hit by a car. She is a caring, nurturing figure, but she also has to deal with being an Omega-level mutant and the physical manifestation of the cosmic Phoenix Force. Jean Grey experienced a transformation into the Phoenix in the X-Men storyline, the Dark Phoenix Saga. She has faced death numerous times in the history of the series. Her first death was under her guise as Marvel Girl, when she died and was reborn as Phoenix in the Dark Phoenix Saga. This transformation led to her second death, which was suicide. Though not her last, she is an important figure in the lives of other Marvel Universe characters, mostly the X-Men, including her husband Cyclops, her mentor and father figure Charles Xavier, her unrequited love interest Wolverine, her best friend and sister-like figure Storm, and her genetic children Rachel Summers, Cable, Strife and X-Man. The character was present for much of the X-Men's history, and she was featured in all 3 X-Men animated series and several video games. She is a playable character in X-Men Legends, X-Men Legends 2, Rise of Apocalypse, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Fate of Two Worlds, Marvel Heroes, and LEGO Marvel Superheroes, and appeared as a non-playable in the first Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Famke Janssen portrayed the character in 5 installments of the X-Men films. Sophie Turner portrays a younger version in the 2016 film X-Men Apocalypse. Turner will return to portray the character as well as her alternate personality the Phoenix in the 2019 film X-Men Dark Phoenix. In 2006, IGN rated Jean Grey 6th on their list of top 25 X-Men from the past 40 years, and in 2011, IGN ranked her 13th in the top 100 comic book heroes. Her Dark Phoenix persona was ranked 9th in IGN's top 100 comic book villains of all time list, the highest rank for a female character. Publication history. Created by writer Stan Lee and artist/co-writer Jack Kirby, Jean Grey first appeared as Marvel Girl in the X-Men, the original team's sole female member. Marvel Girl was a regular part of the team through the series publication. Initially possessing the ability of telekinesis, the character was later granted the power of telepathy, which would be retconned years later as a suppressed mutant ability. Under the authorship of Chris Claremont and the artwork of first Dave Cockrum, and then John Byrne in the late 1970s, Jean Grey underwent a significant transformation from the X-Men's weakest member to its most powerful. The storyline in which Jean Grey died as Marvel Girl and was reborn as Phoenix has been retroactively dubbed by fans the Phoenix Saga, and the storyline of her eventual corruption and death as Dark Phoenix has been termed the Dark Phoenix Saga. This storyline is one of the most well-known and heavily referenced in mainstream American superhero comics, and is widely considered a classic, including Jean Grey's suicidal sacrifice. When the first trade paperback of the Dark Phoenix Saga was published in 1984, Marvel also published a 48-page special issue titled Phoenix: The Untold Story. It contained the original version of Uncanny X-Men 37, the original splash page for Uncanny X-Men 38, and transcripts of a roundtable discussion between Shooter, Claremont, Byrne, editors Jim Salicrup, and Louise Jones, and inker Terry Austin about the creation of the new Phoenix persona, the development of the story, and what led to its eventual change, and Claremont and Byrne's plans for Jean Grey had she survived. Claremont revealed that his and Cockrum's motivation for Jean Grey's transformation into Phoenix was to create the first female cosmic hero. The two hoped that, like Thor had been integrated into the Avengers lineup, Phoenix would also become an effective and immensely powerful member of the X-Men. However, both Salicrup and Byrne had strong feelings against how powerful Phoenix had become, feeling that she drew too much focus in the book. Byrne worked with Claremont to effectively remove Phoenix from the storyline, initially by removing her powers. However, Byrne's decision to have Dark Phoenix destroy an uninhabited planetary system in Uncanny X-Men 35, coupled with the planned ending to the story arc, worried then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, who felt that allowing Jean to live at the conclusion of the story was both morally unacceptable and also an unsatisfying ending from a storytelling point of view. Shooter publicly laid out his reasoning in the 1984 Roundtable. "I personally think, and I've said this many times, that having a character destroy an inhabited world with billions of people, wipe out a starship and then, well, you know, having the powers removed and being let go on Earth. It seems to me that that's the same as capturing Hitler alive and letting him go live on Long Island." Now, I don't think the story would end there. I think a lot of people would come to his door with machine guns. One of the creative team's questions that affected the story's conclusion was whether the Phoenix's personality and later descent into madness and evil were inherent to Jean Grey or if the Phoenix was itself an entity merely possessing her. The relationship between Jean Grey and the Phoenix would continue to be subject to different interpretations and explanations by writers and editors at Marvel Comics following the story's retcon in 1986. At the time of the Dark Phoenix's creation, Byrne felt that, if someone could be seen to corrupt Jean, rather than her just turning bad, this could make for an interesting story. Salicrup and Byrne stated later that they viewed Phoenix as an entity that entirely possessed Jean Grey, therefore absolving her of its crimes once it was driven out. However, the creative and editorial team ultimately agreed that Phoenix had been depicted as an inherent and inseparable aspect of Jean Grey, meaning that the character was fully responsible for her actions as Phoenix. As a result, Shooter ordered that Claremont and Byrne rewrite issue 37 to explicitly place in the story both a consequence and an ending commensurate with the enormity of Phoenix's actions. In a 2012 public signing, Claremont spoke about the context of the late 1970s and the end of the Vietnam War during the story's writing, stating that the history of these events also made Jean Grey's genocidal actions difficult to redeem. In the original ending, Jean does not revert to Dark Phoenix, and the Shi'ar subject her to a psychic lobotomy, permanently removing all her telepathic or telekinetic powers. Claremont and Byrne planned to later have Magneto offer Jean a chance to restore her abilities, but Jean choosing to remain depowered and eliminate the threat of Dark Phoenix returning to power. After several years, Marvel decided to revive the character, but only after an editorial decree that the character be absolved of her actions during the Dark Phoenix Saga. Writer Kurt Busiek is credited with devising the plot to revive Jean Grey. Busiek, a fan of the original 5 X-Men, was displeased with the character's death, and formulated various storylines that would have met Shooter's rule and allowed the character to return to the X-Men franchise. He eventually shared his storyline idea with fellow writer Roger Stern, who mentioned it to Byrne, who was both writing and illustrating the Fantastic Four at the time. Both series writer Bob Layton and artist Jackson Guise, who were developing the series X Factor, a team of former X-Men, had yet to settle on their 5th team member, initially considering Dazzler. Layton opted to fill the open spot with Jean instead, and both he and Byrne submitting the idea to Shooter, who approved it. Jean Grey's revival became a crossover plotline between the Avengers under Stern, Fantastic Four under Byrne, and X Factor under Layton. Busiek later found out that his idea had been used thanks to Layton, and he was credited in Fantastic Four 86 and paid for his contributions. The decision to revive Jean Grey was controversial among fans, with some appreciating the return of the character, and others feeling it weakened the impact of the Dark Phoenix Saga's ending. Busiek maintained that the idea that led to Jean Grey's official return to Marvel Comics was merely a case of sharing his ideas with friends as a fan, and that he neither formally pitched the idea to anyone nor gave it the final go-ahead. Claremont expressed dissatisfaction with the retcon, stating in 2012, "We'd just gone to all the effort of saying, Jean is dead, get over it, and they said, haha. We fibbed. So why should anyone trust us again?" But that's the difference between being the writer and being the boss. In a 2008 interview, Byrne said he still felt Busiek's method of reviving Jean Grey was brilliant, but agreed that in retrospect the character should have remained dead. In the comics, having been fully established as separate from the Jean Grey copy created and taken over by the Phoenix Force, Jean is absolved of involvement in the atrocities of the Dark Phoenix storyline, and she returned in the first issue of X Factor. Claremont later commented on how Jean's revival affected his original plans for Madeline Pryor, stating that the relationship between the two women was intended to be entirely coincidental. He intended Madeline only to look like Jean by complete coincidence and exist as a means for Cyclops to move on with his life and be written out of the X-Men franchise, part of what he believed to be a natural progression for any member of the team. Claremont expressed dismay that Jean's resurrection ultimately resulted in Cyclops abandoning his wife and child, tarnishing his written persona as a hero and decent human being, and the untenable situation with Madeline was dealt with by transforming her into a prolicidal demonic villain and killing her off. Soon after the beginning publication of X Factor, Marvel also reprinted and released the original X-Men series under the title Classic X-Men. These reissues paired the original stories with new vignettes, elaborating on plot points. One such issue, Classic X-Men, paired the original X-Men OO story of Jean Grey's disastrous return flight from space immediately preceding her transformation into Phoenix with the new story, Phoenix. The story further supported the retcon establishing Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force as two separate entities. Following the conclusion of Inferno, Jean continued to be a mainstay character throughout the rest of X Factor. X Factor ended its run featuring the original X-Men with X Factor 0. With the characters transitioning over to Uncanny X-Men, explained in continuity as the two teams deciding to merge. The 14 X-Men divide into two teams, Blue and Gold, led by Cyclops and Storm, respectively. Jean was added to the Gold team beginning in Uncanny X-Men 81. Following Cyclops' possession by the mutant villain Apocalypse and disappearance in the conclusion of the crossover storyline, Apocalypse, the 12, Jean lost her telekinetic abilities and was left with increased psychic powers, the result of the 6-month gap in plot across the X-Men franchise created by the Revolution revamp. During the Revolution event, all X-Men titles began 6 months after the events of Apocalypse, the 12, allowing writers to create fresh situations and stories and gradually fill in the missing events of the previous 6 months of continuity. Due to editing decisions following the success of the 2000 X-Men film, which depicted the character of Jean Grey with both telepathy and telekinesis, an explanation for Jean's altered powers in the comics was never explicitly made, though writer Chris Claremont revealed in interviews that it was intended to be an accidental power switch between fellow X-Man Psylocke, explaining Psylocke's new telekinetic powers as well. Jean was next featured in the 6-issue miniseries X-Men Forever written by Fabian Nicieza, which was designed to tie up remaining plot lines. During the series, Jean revisited many of the events involving the Phoenix Force, and the series introduced the concept of Omega-level mutants, a category for mutants with unlimited potential, which included Jean herself. In June 2001, X-Men was retitled as New X-Men under writer Grant Morrison. The title consisted of a smaller team featuring Jean, Cyclops, Beast, Wolverine, Emma Frost, and Charles Xavier. The overarching plot focused on the team assuming the roles of teachers to a new generation of mutants at the Xavier Institute while navigating their personal relationships and dealing with newly emerging pro- and anti-mutant political sentiments. Jean also made minor appearances in other titles during the New X-Men run, such as Chris Claremont's Extreme X-Men, occasionally lending support to the characters. Jean and her connection with the Phoenix Force was examined again 1 year after the conclusion of Morrison's run on New X-Men in X-Men, Phoenix and song written by Greg Pak in 2005. At the 2010 San Diego Comic-Con X-Men panel, when asked whether or not Jean would return, editor Nick Lowe responded by saying, "She's dead." Regarding Jean's actual return to the X-Men franchise, Marvel indicated that Jean's eventual return is being discussed, but stated that the return of Jean Grey was a story Marvel does not want to rush. Marvel loosely tied questions regarding Jean Grey's eventual return to the events in 2007's X-Men Messiah Complex, in which a mutant girl named Hope, who has red hair, green eyes, and immense mutant powers, is born, and 2010's X-Men Second Coming, which sees both Hope's return as a teenager and the return of the Phoenix Force, following the conclusion of Avengers vs. X-Men as part of the Marvel Now event. A teenage Jean Grey and the 4 other founding members of X-Men are transported across time to the present day by Beast in the series All New X-Men by Brian Michael Bendis. The original adult Jean Grey returned to the Marvel Universe in a new series titled Phoenix Resurrection: The Return of Jean Grey, released on December 27, 2017. The series was written by Matthew Rosenberg with art by Lionel Francis Yu. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?